So let's talk about the one thing. So, even just thinking about uh, all the things that are going on that we're trying to address, the laws that are going around voting, the issues around history education, and talking about our real history and racism and what that looks like. The idea around people going back to work, not going back to work, setting strategies, where you're going to go. The list gets so long. The list gets so long. And it's easy to get into paralysis because your list is so long, it's hard to know what to do first. And when your list is so long, it's also really difficult to do anything with any level of quality because you're trying to do everything. And so nothing gets done as well when you are trying to do everything at the same time. That's just kind of a fact. I know we talk about, multitasking, and there's all this research that says no one ever really multitasks. We may be trying to do multiple things at one time, but we're never really multitasking, right? That's not what's really happening. We may think it is, but that's not what's really going on. We are not really multitasking. Um, it is a fallacy. In other words, that's one of the things that they're saying. No, I just cannot seem to get myself together today. So when I think about doing this one thing, I think about some conversations I've been having over the last few weeks, and with myself and with a number of people. And part of that conversation has been about, how are we focusing on what we want to get done and how we want to get it done? How are we making sure that our energy and our effort is aligned and focused and successful, right? Efficient and effective when we're trying to do so many things at one time. So if you're in a position where you're, for example, looking at a career transition, and I have a number of clients that are doing that right now. What happens is there's so many options. When you really start to think about it, right? When you pull yourself out of pain and out of the sense of urgency, because truly, unless you are in danger, how urgent is it? Good morning, Heather. I'm so excited you're here. How urgent is it really for you to move immediately? It probably isn't, right? But what happens is we get into this urgent need to move, and we got all these things on the list, right? How are we going to do our resume? Who are we going to talk to? How are we going to network? Do we go get a different job? All of these kind of things, and we end up just sitting, in pain. And what happens is we've talked about that polyvagal theory, right? That idea that you're in either dorsal vagal, which is kind of your freeze mode, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. You're in that freeze mode. That's when you just want to ball up in a ball and just go to bed, right? Netflix and chill. That real, I just can't do anything else. Then you've got the sympathetic, which is your fight or flight. And some of us are always in that sympathetic where we're digging in, we're making it happen. We're not necessarily happy about it or in our zone of genius, but we're just determined to just fight. And that's that frenetic energy. And then you've got ventral, which is kind of where you're in joy, you're in peace, you're able to think. And that is a systemic nervous system process, the polyvagal theory. It's about your nervous system. So as beings, we have nervous system response to things that we can't control. It just happens. We just respond in that fight, flight, or freeze. It's through evolution, our ability to survive. And when we don't feel safe, we sit in one of those places. Safety, when you're really feeling safe and secure, you generally tend to be in ventral. That's your zone of genius. Well, when we're in that position where we're like, this isn't working, I got to do something else, I got to figure out something else, or everybody else is telling me what to do, but it doesn't feel right. How am I going to make this happen? We need to try to stop and pause and focus on the one thing. What is the one thing I'm going to do today? What is the one thing I'm going to change today? And it ties into the book, the Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It ties into that. What is that one thing you're going to do today? Maybe it's the one thing you hate. That's his thing. Find the one thing you hate to build a new habit and just do that today. Just that one thing. But we have a tendency when there's so much going on to try to do everything all at once. And we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that, because what happens is when you're trying to do everything all at once, nothing gets the right level of attention and things get done halfway. I was about to say an ugly word. Things get done halfway. They don't get done in a way that is effective or efficient or sustainable, because all you're trying to do is just get it done, right? Just get it all done. Well, number one, we can't always get it all done. You pick the thing, pick one thing you're going to make happen. Some theories say you pick the thing that's going to take the longest, and that's what you do first. Other theories say pick the things that are going to take you the shortest amount of time, because then you can knock more out. And it depends on what your mind is. If you're someone who really loves to see things check off your list, then maybe you start with the things that take the least amount of time, because you can see a lot of checks, and that gives you more energy, and you have more drive, and you're feeling more joy, and you get more done because it pumps up your energy. But if you're the person that's like, you know what, I know this is going to take a while and I can knock these other things out quickly. Let me dig into the thing that's going to take most of my energy and most of my time and most of my effort. Let me do that first. Pick that one thing and do that one thing that's going to make you closer to whatever goal and objective you're trying to achieve. This is really important for leaders. And here's why. We go through these crazy processes, right, to set our strategy and set the objectives and what are we going to do this year? What are we going to accomplish? And we wind up with these pages and pages and books of stuff. And then we go through performance reviews and we're like, write all your performance objectives. And so finally people have come down to say, okay, just 3 to 5 things. Just write 3 to 5 things. But even in those 3 to 5, depending on what they are, there may be 20 things under each of those 3 to 5 things. And when, especially as leaders, we have so many things on the list that we're telling people we want to accomplish, how do they know what to focus on first? How do we know how to align people and move people towards the goals that are most important? Because when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. So as a leader, how do you pick that one thing? You know, guys, this year, we are going to make sure that we are achieving blah, 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 blah. Maybe that's a financial goal. Maybe that's a process improvement, right? We are going to make sure that we get this new system implemented this year. The only goal this year is this big system implementation. Now we got other work we need to do. We're going to make sure that happens. But the key this year is implementing this system. That makes people have the ability to be clear. When they have a bunch of stuff on their plate, they can look at it and say, okay, this is related to implementation, but this is not. So I'm going to do the thing that's related to implementation. And then if I have time, I'll work on the stuff that's not related to implementation. Now, of course, because people are people, you got to make sure that people aren't just blowing stuff off and saying, well, I couldn't do that because it's, implementation. They really had time to do the other thing too, right? So you still have to manage people. But if we're not clear about just the one thing, if we don't focus on just the one thing, we wind up in this whirling dervish of just chaos, right? And there is noise in chaos, and the noise prevents clarity, and the noise prevents success. The noise keeps us from moving collectively where we're supposed to go. The noise also prevents us from hearing information that is necessary to make changes to the thing we are going after. When it's too noisy, you can't hear the important stuff. When it's too noisy, the noise distracts you as opposed to the key information that you need in order to gain insight, in order to take action. So focusing on just the one thing is about clarity. Focusing on just the one thing is about focused energy. Concentrating on just the one thing is about managing that energy to enable greater efficiency, greater effectiveness, and ultimately greater probability of achieving the goal you say you're trying to achieve. Now, here's the challenge. Very few of us are really good at just focusing on the one thing, because life is crazy and we got a bunch of stuff we need to do. Even as I sit here now talking to you guys, what's running in the back of my mind, I almost feel like a computer sometimes. Like I'm talking to you now, like Word is up right now on the front screen, but I got all this stuff running in the background. And so even as we're talking about the one thing, my mind is on all this other stuff that's got to get done today, right? Because I can see my list. I can visualize it. I can visualize my list of 500 items. And yet, physician, heal thyself. And yet, I also know that there's an ultimate goal that I have to achieve. There's an ultimate goal I have to achieve. And in order to achieve that, there's some key things that need to happen. And if I'm going to make those key things happen, I have got to take some of the pieces one step at a time. What is the one thing I'm going to finish today? What is the one thing I'm going to make happen today? And does that thing generate revenue? Does that thing generate time because it creates efficiency? Does that thing impact working in my business or on my business? Does that thing create a connection? What is that thing? How can you go through your whole list? And I cannot remember. Somebody told me there's a methodology that someone uses around calendars. And when you go and look at all the stuff you've got to do, right? The stuff that's green, that generates money. The stuff that's red, that just takes up your time, right? And there's stuff all in between. So how are you taking your calendar and color coding, if that works for you? And I tend to be visual, so color coding works for me. How are you taking everything that you have to do and marking it and color coding it so that you know, okay, here's the stuff I'm working on. Nothing I'm working on today generates revenue. Nothing, not a single thing. But I'm making a conscious decision to do that, because if I don't do this stuff, then my need to work on the things that generate revenue, that won't be fulfilled, because these other things really are still integral to the business. They're just not revenue generating. For those of us who were in positions in organizations that were quote unquote back office positions, right? So your marketing folks, your finance folks, because Heather's on the line, your HR people, tax people, right? All the folks who aren't necessarily frontline revenue generating. What happens is, when we look at the overall grand scheme of objectives, there's not necessarily an objective that is specifically related to us. And so when we look at what that just one thing is, how do we set our objectives so that our objectives match the objectives of the overall organization, and then manage our energy so we're focused on that one thing that gets to the revenue goal or the turnover goal, right? Or the client attraction goal, whatever it is, the business development goal, the efficiency goal. Because when you're in one of those back office positions, you generally are a cost center. You're not generating revenue. Now, you might be able to save money, but you can't save your way to prosperity. At some point, you still have to invest. At some point, you need to have something coming into the funnel, not just the stuff going out. And so while you can slow the trickle of the stuff coming out, there's still going to be stuff coming out. So how do you get your whole organization or your whole function or your whole department focused on the one thing that brings the greatest reward, that reward being efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, revenue, whatever it is, right? Cost savings, whatever it is. And how do you ensure that everybody understands what the one thing is? And even if you are an individual contributor, how do you know what your one thing is? Are you clear on that? And do you give yourself a pause on a regular basis to reevaluate? Because things change. Things change. Business changes, circumstances changes, clients change. We know with this pandemic, things just change overnight, right? So you still have to give yourself the opportunity to take a pause and say, okay, this is what I've been working on this week. Now I'm getting into a new week. Is this still the one thing? Have my circumstances changed? Has our productivity changed? Did we finish another project and have a different outcome than we thought? Doing the one thing doesn't mean you don't open yourself up to get additional information that you need to make adjustments. Doing the one thing actually gives you more freedom to have more flexibility, because you don't have so much stuff going on at the same time. You've got more room to maneuver. You've got more freedom to maneuver because you're just focusing on one thing. And for those of us who have issues with that, who have so many interests, so many desires, so many skills, so many aptitudes, so many things we're working on. I went out and did a rubric of my entire business and all the different, revenue lines. I'm like, oh my God. But why did I do it? I did it because I found myself in that position where there were so many things that I was like, okay, I got to do this for this. I got to do this for this. I got to do this for this. And then I find myself just sitting in overwhelm. So the things I'm telling you are things I battle every day too, right? That I'm aware of, and that I have mechanisms for addressing. And so for me, when I started seeing that and recognizing it, giving myself a pause, giving myself time to go back and look and say, okay, Laurel, you've been saying this for days, and some of this stuff is just not getting checked off the list. What's going on? That pause gave me the chance to go back and say, you know what? Let's just write it all down. I'm visual. Let's just write it all down. Put a grid together. The grid has all the lines, right? Has everything that I say I want to do. And I can now see from a visual perspective what's connected and what's not. Are all of these things completely aligned with where my business is going? Are they aligned with my purpose? Are they aligned with the overall objective of why I even got out of corporate to do this in the first place? Now, luckily, it turns out they all are, because I was a little worried in the beginning. They are all aligned. They are adjacent, right? So those of you in business, they are adjacent pieces of business. But they all connect. There's a theme that runs through all of them. So when you go and look at your list, what is the theme that runs through your whole list? What is the thing that you should be focused on now, because it connects all of them together? And if there is no connection, go back and look at that list. They either need to be connected to each other, supportive of each other, or at least somewhat adjacent. And if not, if they're just truly ancillary to what you're trying to do, then do they really deserve your attention and your time at this moment? Or is it something that's just been on your list for a while, so you just left it on the list? Because many times, especially if we work from lists, the more stuff we have on the list, at some point, it starts to feel like, oh, this is great. I don't have to worry about it. I've got it on the list. It's going to be fine. I'm not going to forget about it. But at some point, that begins to tip. And we're like, oh my God, there's so much stuff on the list. I'm never going to get anything done. And we go right down to that dorsal, right? I got too much to do. I'm never going to get any of it done. Forget it. I'm just not going to do anything. Which is completely contrary to what we wanted to do. We called ourselves getting more efficient. We called ourselves getting more effective because we got it all written down and we're going to make it happen. We are going to make some stuff happen today, right? But those things that we have, those tools that we have, are simply tools. And we have to evaluate the tools for what they are, because at some point, the tools can become weapons. You can use that list to beat yourself up. And I've done that. Oh my God, Laura, really? You got one more thing to the list? Have you done anything on that list today? Anything today on that list? And it just becomes one more thing, one more place for us to be all off kilter and completely unfocused on what's important. So when you feel that coming, I say go back to the one thing. Just one thing. Can you do one thing today? Right now, I had a couple of things I needed to mail. I did my one thing today. I can check that off the list, right? Now, I have a few more things that need to get done today, and I'm going to get them done. But I'm not looking at my list and saying, Laurel, you have got to clear up this list today. Because what I found was when I do that, it starts to be a problem. Because then if the list isn't checked, hey! If the list isn't checked, y'all, this is what I love about this show. So I know, I'm so silly. So, but this is what it's live. And that's what this, the Rutledge Perspective. Radio show live, right? So I'm here with Jerry P. Beasley, producer extraordinaire, and we got this amazing new television in the studio. And so she's been trying to make sure that not only can we broadcast live on her page, we're broadcasting on my page, we're broadcasting on LinkedIn, we're broadcasting everywhere. And we're also been able to put it up in the studio on this big screen. We were going to put it on TV. Let me see if I can see. Have y'all seen it? Can y'all see it? See that big screen? Right there. See that? Isn't that cool? So I'm like on the big TV. So we're hoping at some point we'll be able to put that TV where people can actually see it on the street, because we are in the historic KCOH radio station in Houston, Texas. So anyway, I digress. So I didn't know I was up on the screen. So that's why you hear me say, hey. So anyway, we have a tendency to use those lists and forget that the point of the list is not for the list to drive our insanity. The point of the list is simply a tool for organization, a tool for recollection, a tool for organization. Because if you're using those lists correctly, the lists themselves are changeable. The lists themselves can be managed and manipulated based on additional information that comes in that tells you, you know what, that's not going to happen today. And that's okay. I need to move some other things around. But when we get so static on those lists because everything else is out of control, we can at least control the list. We actually create more challenges for ourselves under the guise of more control. Because if the list starts driving you as opposed to you driving you, you lose your vision and your sight on what's important. You're cutting off the pathway to additional information that you need to inform your action. Because the list said, this is what's next. The list said, this is where I'm supposed to go. And if that's what's occurring, it makes it a really big challenge to be able to get after acquired information to make adjustments. And life is about adjustments. For those of you who are running a business, for those of you who are running a department, if you don't have enough insight and foresight to be able to see what's coming and then adjust accordingly, it will run you over every time. We've all been there. Where something just comes out of the blue, and because you were just running great guns and you were just focused on the task at hand, it bowled you over before you even knew what hit you. But if we take that minute, whether it's the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, beginning of the week, end of the week, to regroup and reset and to reevaluate, what is that one thing we're going to focus on this week? What is one thing I'm going to focus on this hour? It gives us freedom to be able to change. I was in an organization for a very long time, and we would set these goals and we'd set these timelines. And in all honesty, I think they're being so static and so strident about you never miss a deadline. One was cultural, but also I think came from a history of people not living up to their commitments, right? So before you start really being upset with somebody about a culture, go back, take a minute and pause and see what was it that happened over time? What was the experience that occurred that created, right, this outcome? And so in this organization, heaven forbid you miss a deadline, right? So you put things down and you just run towards the deadline. But here's the problem. When information was then acquired later, that meant you either need to change the objective, or you need to change the program, or you need to change the list. It was, nope, we wrote it down. It's in ink. It can't be changed. Good morning, Jenny. Thank you. It can't be changed. It can't be changed. And in fact, you're doing yourself a greater disservice by being so focused on the list, on the deadline, that you don't allow additional information to help inform your next action. The list or the deadline has now become a weapon. It's become a shackle as opposed to a tool that's helpful. You have locked yourself into something inadvertently, thinking it's more comfortable, when what you've really done is eliminate your flexibility. And leadership is all about adaptability and flexibility. That doesn't mean you just put deadlines out and you never care if you meet a deadline. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you are vigilant and you pay attention and you're really focused on information that gives you insight to take action, and you are confident and courageous, when you get information and you're open enough to information that truly does inform you that something needs to change, you are able, because you got information, to go back and say, you know what? Here's the adjustment we're going to make, and here's why. I know this was on the list. Here's the additional information we got. We are going to take this off the list, move it further down on the list, move it further up on the list, and then here are all the other things that it's going to impact. So we just want to get everybody on the same page. But instead of having yourself locked into something because you put it on the list, we put a date by it, what that serves now is an additional evaluation point. You know what? We said we were going to do this in June. We just got some new information. The new information says we probably need to be doing this in July or even October. You can go back to your list, you can go back to your information and say, okay, what else does it impact? And do we really have to wait that long? Is this information that I got, this insight that I got, accurate? Is it timely? Is it really that urgent? Do I really need to make that change? Now you have the ability to make an adjustment, an intelligent adjustment. But if you've used the list as the be all and end all, and the deadline is the be all and end all, you have taken away your own freedom to operate. That's why I talk a lot about setting guardrails and guidelines instead of rules, right? We talk about it, and Heather, you'll appreciate it too if you're still on. We talk about this a lot, people who are kind of math oriented or process oriented. Those of us who have worked in manufacturing, you have upper and lower control limits. Those of you who've taken statistics classes, right? Upper and lower control limits. And then you can operate within those. So I tell people, set those upper and lower control limits. You can't spend more than, I expect you to spend at least this, but you can't spend more than that. Anything you do in between, you got some freedom to operate. It's the same thing when you create these lists and create these deadlines. You need to be solid because people will learn, right? I know they said the meeting starts at 8, but it never starts till 8:30, so I'm going to show up at 8:25, right? So you do need to have some level of discipline. I'm not saying lose your discipline. What I'm saying is make sure that in your processes, you're creating some freedom and some flexibility so that you have guardrails that people can operate within. Because that gives you that ability to flex and still be on point. Still be on point. There's a reason it's, a normal curve. There's a lot of space under that normal curve. And people are all along the continuum under that normal curve, but it's still considered a normal curve. Right? That one standard deviation has a lot of people in it. That has a lot of space in it, in that one standard deviation. Give yourself some room to move. Clearly, if something is urgent, if something is critical, if something has a deadline that, you're going to get some $1 million penalty if you don't make it, clearly that is something that is a stake in the sand. You need to make that happen or be prepared, right, for the penalty. And that's a decision you can make too. That is a choice to be made. But pick the one thing. Yes, ma'am, Jerry.
Michelle Johnson said her one
Good morning,
thing,
Michelle.
Her one thing is going to be to clean out her pantry.
Yes.
Now, Laura, when you just said if it's critical, because you just hit on a good point, I was going to ask about that. Because yesterday I was at the DMV or whatever, the driver's license place.
Yeah.
And then I had a long wait at getting the police report done. And I was going to leave, right? And then I had to do a self-thinking. Like, this is critical. If you don't take care of this today, you can mess up something for tomorrow. So it is a time that you have to go ahead and take care of that business right then and there, right? You can't use yourself up.
You have to really think about what things are critical.
Yeah.
And what's critical changes over time. I mean, like you posted, somebody stole your wallet. That's critical because you need to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
So you may have had a whole bunch of other stuff on your list that was critical for you to do that day. But you know what? You got some additional information that said, I know that was critical.
Yeah.
But this is like life-threatening critical, right? So there are also grades of critical. But you were willing to say, let me adjust what I thought this day was going to be. And sometimes we can do that because we want to, and sometimes something happens to force us to make that change. And more often it's the latter. Especially for those of us who plan, right? We got the day laid out. Generally something happens, it's not something we plan for. It's because something just turned upside down. And so we have to make an adjustment. And so that having the one thing, if you focus on one thing and not 20, then if you get additional information, it's easier to change the one thing or move the one thing than to move 40. But it takes being clear and being clear with your people. If you're leading people, you got to be clear too, because they're not going to know what the one thing is. And here's the deal. I want to be very clear about this because I've said that before to people like, well, they should get it. They should just get it. I don't understand. Remember this, especially newer people in your organization. In the absence of information, people are going to fill the void with assumptions. And they're going to make assumptions and ultimately decisions based on what they know and what their experience is. So if they're not hearing it from you, they're going to get it from either their colleague or from their gut. So don't be mad at them because they didn't understand what you wanted them to do when you weren't clear. As a leader, that clarity starts with you. Now, each individual is responsible for also saying, okay, now let me make sure I understood what you said, right? I mean, nobody gets to say, not me, not my fault. But ultimately, that accountability and responsibility rolls up. So if you're picking the one thing, make sure everybody knows what the one thing is. This month, our focus is client retention. Look at everything that's on your list. Is it related to client retention? If it's not, then I'm not saying don't do it, but that is the stuff that you do after you've done the client retention work. For me, Michelle says clean out her pantry. For me, it is taking some of these clothes, getting them to dress for success. It is cleaning out my space. That is the one thing by the end of this month. The one thing for this month for me is, if I do nothing else, my space is going to be clean and organized, because when my space is cluttered, my mind is cluttered. Mm-hmm. And I have learned over time that that is actually a really good key indicator for me, right? So I don't do filth. I'm not a filth person, but I have a clutter issue. I will admit that. I have a clutter issue. And when my mind is cluttered, my space really does get cluttered. I'm not taking time to put stuff away. I'm not organizing. It just piles up. Books pile up, mail piles up. It just, I can tell when I'm not on my game because my space is cluttered. And what's interesting is I am so much freer and I feel so much better and I'm so much more creative when my space is clear. I won't say empty, but when it is clear of clutter, it's like my brain is clear of clutter and so much can come, right? But I also know, instead of beating myself up about, well, Laurel, you just clean this stuff up and look at it again, right? Because we can go down that path too, right? That's that rabbit hole of beating yourself up about something. I turned that around, the Rutledge perspective, right? Perspective. I turned that perspective around and said, it's not, I can't believe you didn't do that. It's, ooh, something's off kilter because your space is cluttered. That means your mind is cluttered. So let's clear out this space so we can figure out what's going on in your mind so we can get back on track. Just a change of perspective. That's all that was. It's still cluttered. It's still irritating, but I'm not beating myself up with something that is truly an indicator for me of messy mind. So I've turned it from a weapon into a tool. Recognizing that clutter is a tool for me to start to clear out has been a game changer. Because then I also don't get into the doldrums of, oh my God, I got to clean again and I got to. Just declutter. Decluttered space, decluttered mind. When you got a decluttered mind, you're much more effective. You're much more efficient. You can get stuff done, which puts you right back in ventral and you're in joy and peace and everything's lovely. But had I not enabled myself to understand the one thing that was an indicator for me, to turn that one thing from a source of beating myself up and judging myself to a source of awareness and then assistance, I'd still be looking at clutter and getting more cluttered and more cluttered and more cluttered and more irritated and more frustrated and right back into dorsal, right? In my bed with, chocolate chip cookies and covers up to my neck, just sitting. And that's not productive. Although we all need one of those days every once in a while, where you do nothing but just sit in bed and eat and watch TV with no pressure to do anything else. All of us need that time at some point, but you don't want to just live there. So this week, as you're thinking about your teens and as you're thinking about your career, as you're thinking about your business, as you're thinking about your life, what is the one thing you're going to make sure you do as opposed to the 400 things that are on your list? As the world opens back up and we decide who's going back to work, who's not going back to work, because the numbers are increasing dramatically on a daily basis, you guys, if you're paying attention. On a daily basis, the number of people who are actually quitting their jobs because they're refusing to go back to work, to go into an office, is growing exponentially. Exponentially. It's just fascinating to me. People are quitting jobs because they refuse to go back into the office. And organizations that aren't figuring out a way to manage that are going to find themselves now in another quote unquote war for talent. Because now you got to find the people. If you are one of those organizations that's insistent upon people coming into the office, it's going to be harder for you to find them, much less the kind of skills you want, right? So there was already this scarcity sometimes around some skill sets. Now you add the idea of scarcity of people who are willing to come into an office. And man, those who are recruiting people, I can't even begin to fathom how much of a challenge that's going to be going forward. But as an organization, what is your one thing that you're focused on? Are you focused on, we are going to do the best work for our clients to be able to make a decent profit? Or are we going to focus on, the only way to do that is we got to get everybody back into the office? Okay, well, so is the point to have everybody back in the office, or is the point to do good work that's profitable to keep the business going.
Laura, let me ask you something. When you said that about getting everybody back in the office, a lady on television was saying she had an issue with corporations saying, we need to get everybody back to work. We need to get everybody back to work, because she said, we never stopped working. We were just working from home.
Yes, right.
So should they change that verbiage? Because a lot of people are feeling, like you said, that we weren't productive when we've been even more productive working from home.
Words matter. Words matter. And there's politics in that, right? There's politics in that. We need to get people back to work. There's some politics in that. Because when you say got to get people back to work, what people hear is people are out of work. People aren't out of work. People have been working from home. Now, that being said, if you look at the working population, we have lost millions of women out of the workforce. Millions through the pandemic because of childcare issues and elder care issues and all kinds of things, right? The brunt of that burden was held by women. We still have a lot of those traditional roles, right? Stereotypically traditional. So there was some impact of people not being at work, right? Getting people back to work. But that gets into other systemic stuff. Why don't we do a better job around healthcare? Why don't we do a better job around childcare? Why don't we do a better job around public transportation? Why don't we do better jobs around these things that people are now calling quote unquote entitlements and going into all kinds of drama around, right? Because again, it's political and it's about power. This person that you're talking about is exactly right. People have been working. They've been working. They're just working from home. And so I tell all my clients, especially those that run businesses, you can't say you can't work productively from home anymore. That's just not a true statement. We have proven that you can effectively work remotely. What you can say is, for the culture of our organization, the way we want to go forward, we want everyone back in the office because we really relish the in-person collaboration. Just be real. Or you can say, you know what? We just like it better, and it is easier for us to manage people if we have them right there with us. Just own the fact that you don't manage well remotely. If you're not going to do something about it, if you're not going to help those managers who have a hard time managing remotely, if you're not going to give them the skills they need, if you're not going to support them, if you're not going to support the new world order, so to speak, then just own that, y'all. Just own it and understand the consequences of that. What that means in terms of the people that you can recruit. What that means in terms of the people who are going to stay, the people who are going to still stay and be engaged versus the people who are going to stay for now until they find something else. Because there's going to be a lot of that too. People will be transitioning. But we have been working. People have still been working. And words matter. If you want to get people back in the office, then just say that. And I know a lot of organizations and a lot of people who can't, there are a lot of people who can't wait to get back in the office. There are tons of folks, and we're finding the research so far, very early research, y'all. But the research so far is showing what you're finding is the majority of people who are saying, forget it, I don't want to come back. The majority of the demographic of people who are saying that tend to be poor communities of color, and folks who had really long commutes or relied on public transportation for those kind of things, right? So it is significantly, the return to the office is significantly impacting those communities that were already at a different advantage. I won't say automatically disadvantaged, at a different advantage from a socioeconomic perspective, right? Because that, I think one article I read said some people are like a couple of months a year in commute time, if not that, right? When you add up all the time. And if you think about somebody who's going back into the office, they're commuting for 2 hours to go sit in the office and to sit in meetings in the office. Why do that? Why do that? If this is a day that I have that's all meetings today, why am I driving for 2 hours just to sit in a room with you at a meeting? This gives us an opportunity to be more reasonable, right? It's an opportunity to not do things the way we've always done them. And I'm okay with folks going back into the office. Please get vaccinated. Please be safe, right? I'm okay with people going back into the office. Many, many people need that. They need that camaraderie. There are lots of very creative processes that work really well when people can be in the same room with a whiteboard, literally throwing stuff up against the wall, right, to figure it out. There is a lot of creativity that flows in that. A lot of ideas that work well in that environment when people are just together, and it's just kind of this random, just talking and making stuff happen and seeing ideas and doing things in real time. There's a lot of value in that. And this has also put a lot of pressure on us to rethink how we do stuff. Just that one thing. If you got one thing to do, is that one thing going to be a meeting that's 4 hours? That could have been handled by an email? Or is that one thing going to be that opportunity to sit with your colleagues because you got this incredible project that's going to make an impact on customers or on your purposes and organization or for whatever stakeholder? Is that the better use of your time? And if so, what's the best way to do that? Is the best way to do that in person, or is the best way to do that remotely, or some combination thereof? The world has just opened up. And so it's incumbent upon us, especially incumbent upon leaders, to say, what is the ultimate goal? Not, this is the way we've always done it. I hated that as a leader. Well, we've always done it that way. That was one way to get on my bad side. We've always done it that way. Or that's not the way we used to do it. My understanding went to zero in a hurry when I heard that. Right? Because that just means you're not creative or innovative and not willing to think about anything different. Not that there's not learning in history, because there is learning in history, but when you sit in that all the time and are unwilling to at least try something to be innovative, that's a problem. And you're stifling everybody else's creativity. But as leaders, it's really important that we start thinking more critically about what is really important. What is the ultimate goal? Why are we doing what we're doing? And when we can understand that and focus on that, then the how is negotiable. The how is negotiable in many cases, right? As long as it's compliant. The how is negotiable.
This pandemic really came to change some things, though. I really believe that. And I think when you say that we've always done it that way, because I was thinking the other day, the traffic was horrible coming into work. And I've been drained coming into work lately. Yes. And I'm like, why am I so tired? But it seems like it's more people that live in Houston, and the traffic is worse than it's ever been. Yes. And I'm like, I was thinking I could actually do my show remotely and come here twice a week. And then it came to me, no, the camaraderie, like you said, you like coming in on Tuesdays. Yeah. You know, as soon as you walk in, girl, and right. And so then we're talking, so you got that going on. And then I was thinking, though, but I always say, because it's the legendary looking glass window, when you said, just because we've always done it that way, we talked about doing some shows, TED Talk kind of shows, right, in the Escape Lounge and the That's Funny Comedy Club, and doing different settings. I think it came to give some variety. Yes. That you don't have to do things just because it's historic or it's been done like that always. And it's been successful. There are other ways that you can start something and make it successful too. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you at least have to look in the bathtub. Right? Yeah. You know, sometimes you want a bubble bath. Sometimes you want a jacuzzi bath. Both of those are baths. They're for different purposes, right? So it's just a matter of being open to additional information that informs your action and being willing to try something different. Because here's the thing. When we're looking at innovation, truly being innovative, we start thinking about worst case scenarios, because many of us are kind of risk averse, right? How do we manage risk? And when you manage risk, some risks you avoid, some risks you just manage because it's just going to happen. Some risks you actually mitigate. So you spend money to keep that risk from happening, right? Or because you know something's going to do, you just want to spend money to mitigate it. So there's all this continuum around risk management. But if we're not willing to take any risks at all, we will remain in the place that we've always been. And part of the risks that we're all having to take now is being really honest and open about who we are and how we work and what we are willing to do and how we are willing to change and what we're willing to test. Do you really have to have everybody come back? Or do you just want everybody to come back? And if it's a want, what are you willing to lose if some people don't want the same thing as you? What risk are you willing to take, you know, of how much turnover? Or are you willing to, quote unquote, lose your best employees because you want everybody back in the office? And your answer may be yes, and that is okay. There's no judgment in that. The biggest piece is you understanding what you want, why you want it, what the potential consequences are, because you are free to make that choice, but you are not free from the consequences of the choice you make. So just make the choice and get prepared. You know, we talk about
about commutes and about how we do things and where we do things. And is it important to do the same thing over and over again? There's some things as brand, right? You want to maintain your brand, but maybe your brand becomes more about flexibility. Maybe your organization decides, you know what, we're going to just decide to be on the cutting edge of innovative new ways to work. It's not for us going to be just about Zoom or GoToMeeting or Teams or Google Meets. We're going to find out different ways to work. And oh, by the way, we're going to figure out how to make that meeting an email instead of a meeting. We're going to create safe spaces and sacred time slots to protect people's energy, to give people an opportunity to work, to still allow collaboration and connection, but to also work in a way that people have a little bit more freedom. Because the pandemic has forced us to give people more freedom. Mm-hmm. And then to learn to manage to objectives as opposed to manage to screen time and FaceTime. Because that's what a lot of people are doing, because that's easy. If I see you, you must be doing good work, which is also not always true. We've had to force ourselves to be clearer around expectations, clearer around objectives, clearer around goals, clearer around what good performance means. We've had to do that because we're not looking at people in the face all the time. We can't see when people show up or when they leave. Well, you can. There's technology available to do that, but that sends a different kind of message, right? A different kind of Big Brother message. If you're watching, how many keystrokes somebody makes, right? If you're forcing everybody to always be on camera. Yes, it's a meeting, but does it have to be on camera all the time? That's another thing to think. Baby steps. We're going to keep all the Zoom meetings, but you know what? We no longer require people to be on camera. I know when I was having a lot of those meetings at 5 a.m., I'm like, y'all, I will be on the meeting, but my camera will not be on, not at 5 a.m. And I'm up. My brain is up. I am up at 4, but I am not forcing myself to be camera ready at 5 a.m. I'm not doing that. And it's not necessary for me to be productive in this meeting. Right? So, and that was my boundary. That was my boundary. If you want me on the call, you'll have me on the call. I will absolutely do that. I'm more than willing to participate. You won't see my face. And if that's a problem, then we probably need to negotiate something else, because I'm not doing that. And that was a hill I was willing to die on. Because that's the other thing you got to decide as a business. What hill are you willing to die on?
Now, when you said that, Laurel, because it's vice versa. Let's say you said that and then the employer was like, well, we want you on the camera. And you force yourself to be on the camera. And all of a sudden you're giving this mean mug and side-eyeing everybody while you're on the camera. But you had a decision not to get on that camera.
Yes. You got to know you.
Yeah.
You have got to know you. And that's the downside. If somebody is forcing you to do something, you really don't want to do it, and then you show up with all kinds of attitude, then you are reaping the repercussions of your choice to show attitude.
Yeah, because I hear people say that all the time. I'm sick of this job, and they're making me do this and this and this and that. But you have a choice not to do the job if they tell you to do it. But those are some hard decisions. But if you're going to get on their mean mugging and they're looking at you and attitudinal, so how do you work those situations?
I'm telling you, because the relationship is this: a day's pay for a day's work. That's the relationship, especially in states that are employment at will, right? Mm. You can quit anytime, they can fire you at any time, essentially, right? That's employment at will. Mm. So when you say words like words matter, when you say words like they're making me do this, they're forcing me to do this, nobody can make you or force you to do much of anything. You still have a choice. You even have a choice about whether or not you pay taxes. You have a choice. You have a choice. But there are consequences if you choose not to pay them. If you choose to continue to show up at the job and do nothing, that's a choice. There are consequences to that choice, because eventually somebody's going to find that out and you will no longer be willing to or able to or invited to continue to show up. So we all have choices all the time. The easiest way to make the choice that's right for you is to be choosing about the one thing. What am I making a choice on today? They have told me we're having these meetings every Wednesday at 5 a.m. And it's going to be a video conference and they want everybody on camera. Mm-hmm. My one decision today is not whether or not I'm going to go to the meeting, because that is a choice too. So my first choice may be whether or not I'm going to the meetings. But my second choice is, am I going to really be on camera every time? And that may be a choice I have to make on a meeting by meeting basis. But understand, every choice has consequences, both intended and unintended, pleasant and unpleasant, surprising and unsurprising.
But Laura, you pushed yourself past a choice, because remember, you were like, I'm not the camera person.
Yes.
I'm not the social media person. And every time you pushed yourself past that comfort zone of what you were not, it's expanded.
Yes.
So is it sometimes some things we don't want to do is the very thing we should do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Just that one thing, you know, I'll go back to 2019. My vision in 2019, I said, I will be more visible in 2019. I wrote it down, January 2019. The show showed up. The opportunity showed up in August 2019. I'm like, let me think about it. Really? Go back to what you said. Because, see, Jerry tricked me. Because I walked into the show. Actually, it's called, I didn't do my research. I walked in to be a guest on a show and didn't realize the show live streamed. So luckily, I did have my face on that day. And I showed up dressed nice, because I always just put on t-shirts, you know, a t-shirt and jeans. I thought, no, I've never met these people before in person. Let me just do the right thing, right? I'm so glad I did, as my face was plastered all over social media, right? So I had a choice to make. I chose to show up differently. Thank goodness. And then when the opportunity came up, I had a choice to make. And it is still a chore for me. I mean, this being live, I mean, I love it now. I love it. I love being able to show up with you guys, but it is still an effort. It is still an effort to be on camera as much as I'm on camera.
That's not easy, because I don't like to just be on camera for a whole hour. You're doing this whole show, a whole hour on camera. That's, you know, an hour worth of people saying, why she don't have her hair like that?
Right.
What's
wrong with it? Why she wearing it today? Right. Right. What's wrong with her eye? Right. Well, and what's so sad about it is that the hard part about being on camera these days is I'm doing the same thing because I can see me. So I'm like, oh, why did you do that? Why's your face looking like that? Why's your mouth doing that? Right. But that's a choice we make in how we show up. The one thing for me in 2019 was I am going to be more visible in 2019. That was the one thing. And I focused on that, or at least I tried to. You know, I'm doing the same thing now as you're coming into June. I cannot believe it's mid-June. As we go into the rest of the year, what is the one thing I'm going to focus on for the rest of this year? The one thing I'm going to focus on for the rest of this year. Because it just takes one thing. Most of us don't have time to do more than that anyway. So pick the one thing that's going to make the biggest impact and focus on that. And if you have time for other stuff, great. But focus on the one thing. That's what gets us where we need to be. All right. It's been a lovely
One
Tuesday.
quick question before you go. You talked about and forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, and I will.
Okay.
Docile fossil.
Polyvagal.
Polyvagal.
Yes.
And I was thinking about Vice President Kamala Harris, and I noticed that she laughs a lot.
Yeah.
And I said, is this a nervous tick that she has? Because I'm like, why are you laughing? This is not funny. Come on, stay focused. So how do you fix those? Because you said some people do things that are nervous ticks. And if you recognize that, how do you make that work for you and then against you?
You know, that's really interesting, because we all, especially when we show up, people that show up on camera, you know, I think professional, trained, like actors, speakers, those kind of things have a little bit better ability to manage those, because they know what they are, and they either use them to their advantage or they find a way to mitigate them. Like people who have stutters, right? They learn how to manage the stutter. Often when you see people who are laughing at inappropriate times, or really signage, or a lot of ums, ahs, wells, you knows, those are space fillers. That's our brain moving faster than our mouth. And so part of the way to fix that is to, one, be cognizant of it, and then to work on it. You got to be conscious of it and work on it. Some other people just embrace it. This is who I am. This is how I show up. This is what my eyes do. This is what my mouth does. This is what my hands do. I talk with my hands. I talk really fast. I talk really slow. Whereas people, you know, are like, okay, next, right? I have to work on slowing down, and it's hard for me, especially when I'm passionate about something. It's hard for me to slow down.
Now, for employers, would it be wise for some employers, if they're seeing that some of the employees would rather stay home, could they offer, okay, certain people, if they choose to stay home, can work from home, others can come to the office?
What's wise is to put in place a standard flexible work process. Because what you want to be is consistent. Because the lack of consistency leads to claims of discrimination or disparate treatment. So you want to be consistent, right? Because you're already, if you're an organization that makes something, you're already going to have a challenge, because you can't let your manufacturing people work from home. It's only the office folks that can work from home, right? The engineers or whatever, because the folks that are working on the lines, working on the machines, they have to be there to do that. So they don't have a choice. They have to keep coming into the office, so to speak. But companies who want people to come back, it's in their best interest to just figure out a flexible schedule, a flexible process that they can apply consistently. Now, you may say, there is a flexible work option for these roles, or there's a flexible work option for these, these lines of business or what have you. So you can outline it and have it be specific, but it should be as flexible as possible and as broad as possible and as consistent as possible to at least help mitigate your risk of a claim against the process that's discriminatory.
Okay. And last but not least, let's say good morning to your followers on Facebook. Kathy Williamson, good morning to you. Michelle Johnson, Cynthia J. Hickman, we're praying for her. Rena Woolwich, Houston, Jessica Bell, Annette from New York, Phillips, and say good morning to y'all today.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is the best part of my week. These Tuesday mornings, spending it with you guys. Again, I will be watch my page and stuff because I will be on Clubhouse this week. I just don't know the date and time yet. I'm trying to figure out the best time to work in my schedule and for other people's schedule. So I will be on Clubhouse again this week. We'll be talking about this, continuing the conversation on just one thing. So
it's a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great week. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Jenny and Heather and everybody else that was on my Facebook page that I can't see. We will see y'all next week. Bye.